Welcome. Week 17, pretty much a wrap. We still got Monday Night Football, but that brings us to the 2025 Fantasy Football Award Show. Just me. It's midnight for a lot of you guys. Please get in the chat and let us know the fantasy teams that won. I want to do three things tonight. We're going to celebrate our wins. We're going to learn from our mistakes. And then the baby that's sleeping behind this wall right here, we are not going to wake that baby up. So if I'm talking a little bit quieter than usual, that's why. And we're going to do something right off the top. We have UnderdogNetwork.com Fantasy Football Awards. I've got a lot of stuff written down. I've got a lot of brand new data courtesy of Underdog Fantasy. I got two things we'll look at. We'll look at the entire recap. We'll look at the Fantasy Football Playoff recap on top of that. But first, most importantly for all of us, friend of the show, Sam Sermon. He is currently winning $2 million on Underdog Fantasy. Yes, waiver wire king from 2024. We just had him on last week to recap this thing. Had two bullets in Best Ball Mania. Right now, the first place team for $2 million is extremely live. If you guys are curious, he still has an absolute sweat on Monday Night Football. His team's low-key not done either. Sam Sherman got a huge game for Brock Purdy. He just got a huge game from Luther Burden, but he still has Darnell Mooney. He has Algier. He has Blake Corum. The teams like right behind him have like Puka Nakua. So this one's going to be a huge sweat for Sam Sherman. I'm sure that a lot of you guys also had some big time sweats over on Underdog Fantasy. That's what we always talk about. If you're in the show right now, super late, just grinding fantasy football stuff, you are going to like playing on Underdog Fantasy. Promo code the show, play 5, get 75. We have playoff best ball. We obviously have Best Ball Mania coming right after the NFL draft on top of that. But shout out to Sam Sherman. We have a hell of a sweat brewing right now. And hopefully he can take this thing down. So with that, I wanted to just kind of head over to the awards show. Before we do that, I do want to see and explain this chart right here. This is average draft position based off of Underdog Fantasy all the way back in the summer. And then over here on this side is fantasy points over replacement, which takes half PPR scoring, takes the flex spot. It takes how many points you were scoring above replacement every week. So if the average quarterback scores 19.5 fantasy points as the quarterback 12, you only get points if you scored more than 19.5 points over the replacement. Same thing for the running back 30. They score 7.8 fantasy points per week. You only get fantasy points above the 7.8 in fantasy points over replacement. So that's going to be the baseline that we're talking about for a lot of this show. I think it's just a good way to be able to look across positions as we kind of study what worked and what did not work. So the first kind of takeaways looking at this chart for me was the early running backs just dominated once again. I've talked about this a lot. I don't think people have adjusted to how valuable running backs are in half PPR. You can see that green line all right here. It is clearly ahead of the wide receiver line, well ahead of the quarterback line, well ahead of the tight end line as well. The best picks, of course, Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, Bijan, Jameer, Devon Achane, James Cook. All of them are running backs. Derrick Henry goes crazy late. Josh Jacobs, Kyron, Chase Brown, Saquon, Genti. Even these guys didn't have like the craziest seasons, still had better years than Nico Collins, A.J. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, T. Higgins, Devontae Adams, those type of guys. So once again, I do think that running backs dominated. Again, this has been more times than not at this point, and I do wonder if the ADP is going to kind of flip-flop moving forward. At the same time, early quarterbacks, they busted. Jaden Daniels, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray. All those quarterbacks just kind of busted because of injuries. I will say Daniels, Lamar, Burrow, Kyler Murray have had injuries in the past. They are kind of prone to injuries in their style. But I think what is probably equally as important to those guys busting was this tier over here. Drake May, Dak, Herbert, Lawrence, Matthew Stafford. All of them scored just as many fantasy points typically as some of the elite quarterbacks. So obviously Josh Allen, you can see Josh Allen has a really big season, but Jalen Hurts, he was healthy. Typically Hurts, Lamar, these guys are kind of all hovering in this Josh Allen zone. How much better were those guys versus the Drake Mays, Patrick Mahomes, Dak Prescott, Trevor Lawrence? They really weren't that much different. They came at a much, much, much lower ADP. So I wonder if some of these statue quarterbacks, May, Lawrence, Herbert, Dak Prescott, they got better surrounding talent around them right now. I'll throw in Matthew Stafford too. If these guys just kind of close the gap, we're going to have more quarterbacks being drafted next year in this kind of like 60th, 72nd, 84th range, rather than most of the quarterbacks being drafted at around 110 overall. So that was the quarterback takeaway. Also wanted to point out some of the running backs that hit late. We have Javonte, we have Rico Dowdle, we have Travis Etienne, DeAndre Swift, who just had a monster game in week 17. All of these were ambiguous backfields, and the old running backs won them. So I'll also throw out Ramondre Stevenson, who had a big week 17. There was rookies, Travion, Bashal Tuten, Kyle Monungai, Jaden Blue. The rookies were in there to kind of disrupt the backfields, but not every rookie wins these backfields. The old running backs can also win these backfields as well. So that was a takeaway. And then maybe the last one that I'll talk about for now is the wide receiver dead zone. And that goes down from about round 7 to round 13. There was not a single wide receiver in this range that did anything. So you can see all of the wide receivers, this yellow-orange line, well below the other positions. You can see all these busts, different types of busts. We had rookie bust, we had veteran bust. It didn't matter. You just don't see any wide receivers in this range. Michael Pittman had a decent year. Quentin Johnson and Wan'Dale Robinson really late had decent years, but this entire range completely dead. So we have to kind of look into the reasons being. I think that there's a kind of a team issue across the NFL where it's a lot of the wide receiver 2s, wide receiver 3s on teams kind of get pushed up where they really shouldn't be. So that's where a lot of like the Cam Scadabos, Travis Etienne, Javonte, that tier, then your pocket passers, it's them or like the wide receiver 3 on a team. I'm not sure about that one right now. So I think we're going to have to really talk about kind of the wide receivers early in the draft that project well, and then that bad tier in the middle, and then find some of the late round guys that we want to talk about. But this has been a couple years in a row where this tier of wide receivers really has just not performed really well. On the flip side, the very end of the drafts, you'll see here. So we're talking about pick 132 all the way to pick 216. So the dart throws very end of the draft. And what you can see is on average, this blue line is the line that's above the rest. That's the tight end scoring. The reason being Tucker Kraft, Ferguson, Kyle Pitts, Dallas Goedert, Hunter Henry, even a couple of these late round guys at the very end of drafts, they just project better. Like there was no way Jake Ferguson wasn't going to be the starting tight end for the Cowboys. There was no way Hunter Henry was not going to be the starting tight end for the Patriots. Same thing with Pitts, same thing with Goddard, same thing with Tucker Kraft, same thing with Travis Kelce. All of them projected just as well as a lot of the wide receiver 2s on their own teams. They also score just about the same amount of fantasy points across seasons in this range. So this is a good range for tight ends historically. This is why I like drafting 3 tight ends in best ball, but also just wanted to mention there was not that much of a drop-off between them and your Hawkinsons, Ingrams, George Kittle and Bowers. They're kind of unique cases because they missed time due to injury. But for the most part, tight ends in this range out-project the wide receivers and running backs against them straight up in ADP. So something to keep in mind there. I think we'll keep it moving for that part because I wanted to get to the next graph. Okay, this graph, we have the regular season versus the fantasy playoffs. And obviously I'll have to update this because I know Luther Burden just had a big game. I try to add some fantasy points to Christian McCaffrey, but I'll update this, posted this one to Twitter. But this just shows you who went crazy early on and then who kind of dudded out in the playoffs. Obviously, playoff legends include Kyle Pitts, Trevor Lawrence, Chris Olave, Chase Brown went absolutely crazy. Nobody went more crazy than Derrick Henry. We'll get to him in a second. Brock Purdy goes crazy. Ramondre goes crazy. So those are like the guys that you needed kind of out of nowhere in best ball. And then on the flip side, Jahmyr Gibbs got you to the dance, did nothing once he was there. Jonathan Taylor got you to the dance, Josh Jacobs got you to the dance. Javonte got you to the dance. Josh Allen as well. They just did nothing once it got to the fantasy playoffs. I'm not sure there's a whole lot to kind of learn from this. I think there's some trends here. Like you can see some of your rookie running backs, Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, RJ Harvey, Ashton Genty, Travion Henderson kind of in this range. So maybe there's a little bit of evidence of the rookies performing a little bit better in the fantasy playoffs versus the regular season, but nothing all that much. And a lot of that kind of happened due to injuries rather than them kind of like earning more work with their playing time. And then the top league winners, no matter what, throughout the entire year, Christian McCaffrey, Puka, James Cook, Bijan Robinson, these guys were nasty throughout the entire season. I'll throw out Trey McBride at tight end as well. So that's just kind of like the history of how the season unfolded. Obviously, you need to make the playoffs to have these kind of legendary performances out there, but you need both to kind of win your league. And that will bring us back to the Fantasy Football Awards. Okay. With that said, drum roll, please. Fantasy Football MVP for 2025. This is a no doubt about it, Christian McCaffrey. And I just wanted to bring this up because we've talked about Christian McCaffrey probably more than any first round pick on the channel. And the reason is because he was so damn just like chaotic in the comments. Like everybody kept saying CMC is going to get hurt. And we would just keep saying, well, what if he doesn't get hurt? He's the best fantasy football producer of the last half decade. Nothing about the offense has changed. Everyone's back. It's the same CMC role. And he was healthy currently. So I think CMC, by far, the biggest takeaway that you should have is you trying to project injuries for players who are currently healthy. It's just a losing strategy. So Christian McCaffrey survived the entire season, had another monster game. He had over 12.4 points to best ball rosters per week. That was easily the highest according to Spike Week. Of course, on all the charts that I keep posting, he's all the way up and to the right. He was a monster. I do wonder if he's going to be the first overall pick in fantasy next year, if that's going to be Jahmyr Gibbs. But he was a monster throughout the entire season, and he's back under contract for the 49ers next year. I'll say the regular season MVP, I'll give a slight lean to Jonathan Taylor. In weeks 1 through 13, Daniel Jones was healthy. He had 23.3 half PPR points per game. That was barely ahead of Christian McCaffrey. I also wanted to acknowledge Jonathan Taylor was the 21st overall pick on fantasy. He was the running back 10 in drafts. Really, it was just the quarterback upgrade. And it doesn't have to be an elite quarterback, but if you go to like disaster level quarterback to just service level quarterback, that's a pretty big leap for fantasy points. So he's a Hall of Fame level talent. We saw him flash late in 2024 before the offensive line, before the Daniel Jones injury happened. He was a monster. He actually was in first or second place on over 50% of the teams that drafted him over on Underdog. So hopefully you guys had Jonathan Taylor. He got you to the playoffs. Hopefully you had a bye week as well because of him, because he didn't do a whole lot once you got to the semifinals. On the flip side, as usual, fantasy playoffs MVP goes to Derrick Henry, goes absolutely nuts in week 17. He's probably going to win Sam Sherman or somebody else $2 million because of his performance. Just wanted to mention, this is what Evan Silva said over on Establish the Run. He said, quote, "It starts to get a little chilly out. It hurts to tackle Derrick Henry when it's chilly. Defenders start thinking about their families right around Thanksgiving. It's the holidays. That's when it's time for Derrick Henry." I think that's totally true. He didn't even have to have Lamar Jackson to pull it through. He's going to be 32 next year. I cannot wait to see where his ADP is going to be. You don't draft Derrick Henry for September. You draft him for December. And Derrick Henry truly just does it again. Like, he's not a once-in-a-generation player, but he is extremely unique in just how long he can last. It's just like actually crazy to see it happen. But shout out to you guys if you're able to sneak him into the fantasy playoffs, because he was absolutely the guy you needed to have to win any of the best ball championships. Fantasy football breakout, I'll go with Jackson Smith and Jigba. I know that he like broke out the year before. We're talking like that next level. He was fantastic. 3.4 yards per route. That's going to go down in the history books. He's going to be a top 10 pick next year. The thing that really kind of like jump started the JSN kind of true breakout was the coaching change. Clint Kubiak did not think he was going to be a slot wide receiver. He pushed him to the perimeter. He pushed his routes down the field, and he actually became like the most lethal downfield wide receiver in the game. I personally did not see that coming, but he went from the third round. He'll be a top 10 picks next year. So I thought that was like a true breakout all the way to the upper echelon. Him versus Puka Nacua throughout the entire season. Those were the top 2 fantasy wide receivers. It really wasn't close after them. The sleeper of the year, I'll go with Drake May. Sounds kind of silly because, he's the 3rd overall pick, but he just went absolutely nuts. He finished the quarterback 2 in week 17. I think it's Brock Purdy, and then it's Drake May. What's so crazy about Drake May is you needed the infrastructure around him to get better, and then you also needed Drake May to improve in his second season. It was pretty clear that I thought he was going to improve in his second season. He has like a lot of physical attributes. Everyone around him seems to think that he puts in crazy amount of work, so that's not surprising. What I think was surprising was how functional the Patriots offense around Drake May was. So Josh McDaniels, giving him a lot of credit at offensive coordinator. The second highest average depth of target went to Drake May. Also the 12th highest neutral pass rate. So they were a lot more pass heavy than you would think going into the season. Kayshon Boutte made plays. Steph Diggs obviously made plays. But Hunter Henry, Kyle Williams, Matt Collins, both of the running backs, they all made plays at different parts of the season. So Drake May went from a double-digit round pick to somebody that's probably going to have a discussion for the second quarterback in fantasy next season. It really just comes down to the downfield passing, and then that red zone rushing made Drake May the sleeper of the year. Fantasy bust of the year, I'm going to go with Brian Thomas. He was about the 14th overall pick over on Underdog Fantasy. He averaged 75 yards per game as a rookie. You almost never see these guys dud the second season, but that's what happened here. So just kind of want to think about how did this go wrong? I think there's a couple things here. Number one, the red flags. In the preseason, there were just reports of drops and bad chemistry. Sometimes that means nothing. Sometimes there's actually something to glean from it. In this case, there was. Also wanted to say the new offensive coordinator and play caller kind of builds an offense built on like intermediate success, where Brian Thomas more of a boundary downfield wide receiver. So that had a little volatility. They spent, the second overall pick on a wide receiver. So obviously more target competition, maybe a sign that they didn't really love Brian Thomas's fit into the rotation. And then you had an up and down quarterback and offensive line. So Brian Thomas, he just fell apart immediately in the season. And then afterwards, Jacoby Myers and Parker Washington just straight up were out dueling him for targets over the middle. So I don't know if he's going to be back on the Jaguars next season. It'd be pretty unprecedented to trade somebody as productive as Brian Thomas. But I do think some of these red flags are true, and that stylistically, him and Liam Cohen just don't kind of see the game the same exact way. And that's why they signed Jacoby Myers to that big time extension. So huge bust, Brian Thomas. There's a lot of big bust I can throw out. Let me look at a couple more here. Xavier Worthy's on that list. Marvin Harrison, Ladd McConkey. These guys were all on this list. Travis Hunter and Calvin Ridley were struggling for most of the season. On top of that, Alvin Kamara. So we'll go over the worst picks in every single round, but the round 2 wide receivers were pretty hit and miss for the most part, but Brian Thomas was definitely the biggest miss of the bunch. Best rookie, I'm going to go with Cam Scatabo, and the reason why I'm going to go with him over a Emeka Egbuka is because when Cam Scatabo was in your lineup, he was producing. There was no funny business with Cam Scatabo. So we couldn't play him in week 1. He has a huge breakout in week 2. The following 6 weeks, he's a top 24 scoring running back. He finishes the running back 3, the running back 6, and the running back 11 on top of that. Then he breaks his ankle, and then he's out of your lineup. You're not taking zeros. You're not doing the Emeka Egbuka part where you're hoping that he bounces back. He's either producing or he's out of your way. And I think that if he didn't get hurt, He would have been an awesome pick. He didn't get drafted until 110th overall, both in like the real draft and in fantasy drafts. He was being drafted after Tyrone Tracy. If he would have been healthy, he would have been a top 15 running back. And then on top of that, he's just the man. So I'm sure everyone enjoyed him, but it was just the fact that you picked him up or you drafted him, you put him in your lineup, and at no point did he disappoint you until he got hurt. So hopefully he can stay healthy next year, because he really does have that kind of like fantasy football cheat code type of profile. Best tight end pick, no surprise, Trey McBride. He had added 52.7 more fantasy points to best ball rosters than the next best tight end. I think it'll be a top 15 pick. There's like no debate about this. Trey McBride was a monster. I think that maybe the moral of the story with him was just touchdown regression is so obviously massive. He didn't score basically any touchdowns in 2024. He didn't score any touchdowns as a high schooler or as a collegiate athlete. But here's my rule. If you can dunk on dudes at the 50-yard line, you can dunk on dudes in the end zone. And I saw Trey McBride dunk on dudes, run through guys at the 50-yard line. It was inevitable that he was going to go crazy in the red area once he got more opportunities. So we got that with Jacoby Brissett. Brissett is under contract for next season. Kyler Murray's probably going to get released out there. Brissett did not win a football game, so we'll see if they're actually going to commit to Brissett as a starter. But Trey McBride looks to be like the best tight end in the NFL. It's a Tim and Kittle right now for that top spot. Best quarterback pick, I would just say, like, if you go back to the initial chart here, Matthew Stafford was just like the pretty much like him and a little bit of Jackson Dart, like the only like true late round tight ends that went crazy. A little bit of Tyler Shuck in there as well. But Matthew Stafford was that guy right off the jump. They were scoring 30, 40 points for a long time. Matthew Stafford, once we knew that he was healthy, it was just go time. So whenever you have Puka, whenever you have Devontae Adams, Sean McVay, all surrounded around Matthew Stafford, big days are going to be coming. Kind of a crazy stat here. There was 13 quarterbacks drafted after the 10th round, pretty routinely on Underdog. Stafford was one of two to add more than 35 fantasy points over replacement. He had 57, and that doesn't even include tomorrow night's game, where he's probably going to add even more around him. I think moral of the story with Matthew Stafford is modern medicine much better than it was even 5-10 years ago. Shout out to that freaking chamber that we're talking about with Matthew Stafford. But I think maybe more importantly is once we get into like the double-digit rounds in fantasy, it's only about the path to upside. And Matthew Stafford's path to upside is like very obvious. He just needed to stay healthy. He's proven that he's going to be a at least upside quarterback too in seasons with McVay being healthy. But once you threw in Devontae Adams in there, they're going to definitely pass the ball at the goal line more. So there was a clear pass to Matthew Stafford bouncing back. He just had to stay healthy. But a lot of the other guys being selected around him, you don't even know if they're going to be on the football field, if they're any good or anything like that. So I think injury discounts that late in the draft does make sense. Waiver wire winner of the year, I'll go with Harold Fandon for this one, 21-year-old rookie. He's probably going to finish as the fourth most rookie tight end fantasy points in NFL history. It was a wild season for him. In week 1, he finished as the tight end 9. He was the thumbnail player image for the week 2 waiver wire show. Then that next week, he finished as a tight end 13. Kind of went on a little bit of a dud streak with David Njoku. And then to close the year, tight end 10, tight end 1, tight end 14, tight end 2, and then another tight end 10 finish here in the finals. So he's a monster. He really does remind me of a miniature version of Trey McBride. Maybe McBride's a little bit more physical than Harold Fandon, but he was setting collegiate records in college for receptions. He just catches a bunch of them right off the jump, despite David Njoku being out there. They gave him full-time snaps after David Njoku got hurt. We'll see about David Njoku next year, but Harold Fandon, I know he's really good at football, and the way he wins is going to be very, very good for fantasy football starting next year and beyond. I'll say the boomer pick of the year goes to Travis Etienne. He was a top 12 fantasy running back 9 times this year. 9 times. Pretty wild stuff. Obviously, he went really, really late in drafts. Bashal Tutin was the talk of the town. I'll even throw out The other running back that gets traded right before the season kicks off as well, and Tank Bigsby. So I think with Travis Etienne, the thing to learn is, one, just because a rookie's in town does not mean that the veteran's going to lose his job. Secondly, if you look at a guy's career and he was good at fantasy, then plays through injury, that does not mean that he actually was bad the year before. It was probably just because he was injured. So these guys that were playing through injuries, I'll say Travis Etienne was that in 2024. If their ADP drops to a certain point, all they have to do is just be healthier than they were the season before. And then on top of that, with Travis Etienne, you get all the Liam Cohen stuff, who turned Bucky Irving into a fantasy superstar. So he's a free agent, which also is another thing. He's probably going to put more work into his body. But he's a free agent this year, and he's going to be back with Jacksonville. I can almost guarantee it after the season that he just had. On the flip side, I'll do slappy pick of the year. I'm going to TreVeyon Henderson. Had monster weeks in weeks 10, 11, and 15. He was the top 6 running back in each of those weeks. He was constantly at the very top of the miles per hour depth kind of list on Next Gen Stats. I don't know what to say if he was a good pick, a bad pick. If week 17 is all that matters, then he did nothing while Ramondre went crazy. If it's the full playoffs, he had a really awesome week 15, but did nothing in week 16 and 17. He obviously did nothing for the first 9 weeks of the season. Terrell Jennings was playing over him. His 2 big games were also when Ramondre was sidelined. I don't know if he's a good pick, a bad pick, a good process, bad process. I have no idea what the hell we're doing with TreVeyon Henderson, but I will acknowledge that dude is fast, and the Patriots were good, and he had some absolutely monster weeks. So I'd be curious if you guys think TreVeyon was a big pick or a big hit or not, kind of depending on where you drafted him. On Underdog, he was like a 5th round pick. I think that was probably too much for me. But maybe in your like Yahoo leagues, he went a little bit later than that. PPR scam of the year, Wan'Dale Robinson. I obviously couldn't believe this. I had Darius Slade as one of my most drafted players, so I guess like a slight win there is directionally accurate. But Wan'Dale just like turned in a little bit similar to the JSN stuff, where he was a slot wide receiver forever. Then Malik Neighbors gets injured, and then they're running a more downfield offense because of Jackson Dart and then Russell Wilson. And all of a sudden, Wan'Dale Robinson's running more downfield routes, and it's starting to work. And he scored a bunch of fantasy points this year. So Wan'Dale Robinson did not see this one coming, but he actually finished quite high, if I can find him. He was one of the best picks you can see right here next to Quentin Johnson, Michael Wilson, at wide receiver, period. So shout out to all you guys. And that's in half PPR and full PPR. As usual, even better over there. All right, these ones were just more rapid fire from you guys. I'll say the Please Stop It award goes to Zach Charbonnet at the goal line. Just Kenneth Walker's season was a total disaster the entire way. Got that one wrong. One of my biggest misses of the year definitely was Kenneth Walker. I'll say the Please Keep It Up award was definitely the Jacoby Brissett stuff to Michael Wilson. We got one again in week 17 up the sideline. The Bengals did not want to tackle him. But Michael Wilson was just like dunking on dudes. I thought his tape was better than Marvin Harrison. He's just more quarterback friendly, better at the catch point. Zone coverage about the same as Marvin Harrison. But Michael Wilson with Jacoby Brissett, that was good fun for a while there. This is from Kevin Epley. The Unc Still Got It award goes to Stafford, Devontae Adams, Derrick Henry, and Travis Kelce. All very true. Sorry about that. Probably my favorite award comes from Joel. The Divide His Projection by 2 award goes to Justin Jefferson. Absolutely true. He was like one of the most frustrating guys to rank every single week for me. If he's not hospital balled award goes to Brian Thomas. I think it's another good point, is he got absolutely lit up in that preseason game. I think that's part of the Brian Thomas, storyline for the entire season. That comes from Goose. From MP, the biggest could have been award, Ashton Genty on the Bears. We just saw DeAndre Swift go crazy again in the finals. Genty was, I would say, one of the biggest bust in fantasy. And I think that was one of those situations where you could have seen it coming. Like if you study offensive lines, you knew the offensive line was in deep trouble. And then early on in the year, they lose left tackle Colton Miller. That just made it worse. So Genty was always a sell high to me. Geno did not look right. You never know with Chip Kelly what the hell is going on over there. But Ashton Genty on the Bears, that would have got interesting. Blue Tent Merchant. This could have gone to a lot of guys all throughout. Woody Marks as one, Chris Olave as another. But Blue Tent Merchant, according to Jameson Hutchinson, goes to Jalen Waddle. I like that one. Milk Carton Award goes to Ladd McConkey, who literally dressed up as the milkman at Justin Herbert's Halloween party. The Delta Skylines Gone on Vacation Award goes to Alvin Kamara. That's from Ben Nagoshi. That one's extremely true. That's maybe another point I wanted to hit on eventually is the decent players on the worst teams in the NFL, when they're injured, they are done for the year. We saw this with Garrett Wilson. We saw this with Jaden Daniels. We saw this with Alvin Kamara. There were some others out there on top of that. You're just not going to come back. When you've been eliminated, you're like going to play the last 2 weeks of the season. Nuh-uh. So all that stuff is pretty good. The last thing we'll do tonight, the best picks in every single round. We'll go rapid fire here because it's getting late. Christian McCaffrey, round 1, fantasy MVP, no doubt about it. Round 2, Jonathan Taylor, the highest advance rate in the regular season. Second round pick, just went absolutely crazy. JSN, full breakout, downfield role with Clint Kubiak. James Cook, no regression here, does the same exact season as he did last week. Great player, great offense. Keep it going. Also somebody, you buy the dip on that holdout. Nobody holds out in the NFL. No one's losing game checks around here anymore. So buy the dip on these holdouts in August. George Pickens, really good player, now goes to a great offense. All of a sudden, all the per route numbers look even better. They run more routes because it's more of a pass-first offense on top of that. I thought this was one of the easiest calls out there, one of my favorite players before the season kicked off, and we got this one rolling right away. So George Pickens, one of the best picks. Chris Olave goes crazy in the fantasy playoffs. We talked about this on a show with Ryan Heath, using first downs per route as the metric, and his ADP versus that metric was just way off. Like the Christian McCaffrey stuff, everyone thought they can predict that Chris Olave was going to miss a bunch of time because of concussions. Turns out you can't predict concussions. He stays healthy. Tyler Shuck's better than you think. Chris Olave really breaks out without Rashid Shaheed. The rest is history. So really good player. A lot of things broke his way, but that can happen. There was like no good picks in round 7 and round 8. I'll say Emeka Egbuka, just because of September was crazy. But man, he was so frustrating for the rest of the year and finished the year 4th in wide receiver route. So that's like a pretty bad 7th round. I didn't even want to mention an 8th round pick because it was so bad. Travis Etienne, he had 2 1,400-yard seasons, adds another with Liam Cohen, Cam Scadaboo. He would have been a top 15 guy, in my opinion. Javonte Williams, he beats Miles Sanders, and then Jaden Blue. We'll get to Jaden Blue in a second, but I think that Javonte Williams is somebody that probably most regrettably I was not on, and that one was pretty obvious to me. Like right after week 1, I was like, damn, this one's going to be a long year for me, and it was. Dallas Goedert, just good player, good team, no questions asked. Same thing with Kyle Pitts. It was his lowest ADP ever. It's his contract year. He was a former, 6th overall pick. What if these guys all of a sudden are healthy again? It's a very similar discussion to the Travis Etienne stuff. Like lowest ADP ever for, we know he's actually good at football. It just, will he ever be the same? And we got lucky. He was. Quentin Johnson, former first rounder, tied to Justin Herbert. That's a good bet to make. Rico Dowdle, he just dominated throughout October. Panthers want to be really run heavy, and Rico Dowdle, based off the 2024 numbers, was able to handle a big workload. So we saw that for a minute. Michael Wilson went crazy. That's a 3rd rounder, formerly year 3 breakout guy, can play inside and outside, just needed more targets. And he was somebody I thought that his film on low volume was actually better than given credit for. So awesome pick. Woody Marks and Harold Fannin were the best rookies late. Harold Fannin went crazy, but Woody Marks, there was something to learn from this one as well. Joe Mixon, there was rumors that matched up with what the team was doing with their actions. So the internet rumors were he had this crazy foot injury. He's like not going to play this year. He may never play football again. And then the team, they put him on the NFI list, which means that he got this injury away from the team, and they're threatening to take away his guaranteed money. So those two things matched up to me eventually. And then when you look at the rest of the roster, it was Nick Chubb, who's just like never going to last, Damian Pierce, who's been replaced multiple times, and then it was Woody Marks, who was a fringe third, fourth round pick as a rookie, who could also catch passes. So Woody Marks, definitely in hindsight, was the best pick of the bunch. That was another one that I got wrong, but makes a ton of sense and something to learn from moving forward. Now, probably my favorite part is looking at the worst picks in every round, and I'm not going to pick just like the most injured players. That's too easy. I want to do like who were the worst picks, period. Just bad process, too much hype, an injury that we knew about that just like never turned the corner. These were just like the stone cold worst picks. First round, no question about it to me, was Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson is awesome. He still might even be the best wide receiver in the NFL. You just can't take a wide receiver in round one when you have no damn clue if the quarterback who's throwing him the football is any good at all. And we had no damn clue if J.J. McCarthy was going to be good or bad. So that was just a situation where the way that the team was kind of talking about J.J. McCarthy wasn't my favorite. The way that reporters and like fan analysts were talking about practices wasn't my favorite either. So Justin Jefferson, I thought that was like a bad process play. He had no business going ahead of the Christian McCaffrey types at running back, had no business going ahead of, like Jamar Chase for a second. And then it was CeeDee Lamb, who I'd rather have over Justin Jefferson. There was a lot of guys up in the first round. Brian Thomas in round two, we already talked about him. Terrible bust. Marvin Harrison, he was just somebody where his ADP was going to where if Marvin Harrison was good, that's where it would kind of settle. And we had no idea if Marvin Harrison was good or not. In fact, I would say based off his rookie tape, I thought there was a decent chance he was pretty mediocre. Like, he's just not that crazy of an athlete. His contested catchability is not like it is with T. Higgins and Drake London, some of the kind of upside comps for Marvin Harrison as a prospect. So not only did he not like take that next leap really, then Michael Wilson goes crazy at the end of the season to kind of just like really prove that point. So Marvin Harrison, his hype was just too high for what the results of his rookie season was. Xavier Worthy, this was a miss by me. I was interested in Xavier Worthy, but tiny wide receivers can get injured. We saw, Travis Kelce dislocate his shoulder on the first play of the freaking season. He's also dealing with ankle injuries for a big part of the season. He loses underneath role. Even though Mahomes is much better in fantasy, they're not hitting on the deep ball still. And once Rashee Rice was back, he was just not going to get the underneath stuff. So he was just like not good enough at football to be worth a fourth round pick. So there's kind of a boom bust profile in there with Mahomes. And we got the Chiefs side of the equation, right? That like Mahomes was awesome in fantasy, but Xavier Worthy himself just not good enough at ball. Alvin Kamara, just an old player on a bad offense. He doesn't return after elimination. So really bad pick there. Matthew Golden, our first rookie. Just brutal. The Packers were very good on offense this year. He was just always in a rotation. He picks up a slight injury in the middle of the season, but for the most part was a low volume player in college and then proved to be an extremely low volume player with the Packers. Christian Watson comes back earlier than expected, really just kind of steals the show, but the runway was there. Matthew Golden was really good at football. There was a moment, no Jaden Reed, no Christian Watson, but still absolutely like nothing out of Matthew Golden. Pretty concerning for him. Caleb Johnson, we had the kickoff return the first week, and then that was a wrap. But I think even without that, we're talking about a third round rookie with an old school quarterback and an old school coaching staff. So like to earn the trust of those guys is just a lot harder to do, especially when you have two kind of veterans in the mix that can play in both phases in Jaylen Warren and Kenny Gainwell. So Caleb Johnson, big time bust as a rookie. Darnell Mooney, collarbone injury that we knew about preseason. So if we were drafting him on Labor Day, we knew it was a bad injury. He's a tiny wide receiver and there was quarterback uncertainty. So Darnell Mooney was awesome the year before, but tiny players with these injuries that we know that we have, it's just kind of a tough combination. Brandon Ayuk, man, like multiple ligament ACL tears, just a dangerous game in that first year back. So his ADP was plummeting. And then Brandon Ayuk is just also just an interesting freaking dude. So we saw the speeding video. We saw the contract holdout. We saw like the shorts. He was in the doghouse. Like when we're talking about injured players who need to like really be on top of the game with rehab, and they've also kind of had some of these like character kind of concerns all linked up, recipe for disaster. So Brandon Ayuk's going to be released in the next couple weeks here, and we'll see where he goes. Trey Harris, another rookie, boom bust wide receiver. Obviously liked being attached to Justin Herbert, but Trey Harris was kind of like a one-dimensional prospect, and then there was a bunch of talent in that wide receiver room, especially after they added back Keenan Allen. So Trey Harris bust, J.J. McCarthy. Just the way that everybody would talk about McCarthy always had me nervous. Just somebody that did not have enough reps with the team. Also pretty slender at quarterback, and plus runs around. So you kind of run into some of these injuries that we saw, like the hand injuries with J.J. McCarthy. Obviously, the ankle injury was the big one there, but I don't know, just the way that the coaching staff talked about him just never gave me a whole lot of faith there. So I think that's somebody like Coach Speak Index, for example, just reading like between the lines on some of the ways teammates, reporters, coaches talk about players, we can kind of learn something from that. Speaking of Jaden Blue, horrific pick, like barely even played the entire season. This is one where when Dane Brugler from The Athletic, and I'll say like Daniel Jeremiah, a couple of like the biggest names out there, they don't want to talk negatively about prospects, especially when it comes to character. Like they don't know these guys all that personally. The last thing they want to do is just like try to ruin some young kid's life. So they're very, very selective when they talk negatively with character about players. Dane Brugler in his write-up mentioned this with Jaden Blue. Jaden Blue also falls in the draft. That does not matter for the fantasy community. We only see the upside with these type of players. Could Jaden Blue have been the guy you needed this year? He could have. The odds of that were extremely low, just because of the draft capital, because of the character concern. You start seeing the freaking cleats that he was wearing and some of the training camp injury. You saw that report from the former like wide receiver coach or whoever it was from camp, talking that he's like not locked in. Those are all signs, so you never want to figure out that you drafted somebody that nobody wanted to be around, but you can read between the lines on some of these guys. Jonnu Smith, just friggin' big Darnell Washington, man. Like you're just not going to see the field when that's your competition. So Jonnu Smith, career committee tight end. You got a freaking house that you're competing against. Not going to happen. Another rookie, Jack Besh, second rounder, has a path to playing time, but a path to playing time on a terrible offense. And I think what was most important with Jack Besh was I thought he was a slot, like power slot type of prospect. How are you going to be a power slot when you're on the team with Brock Bowers? How are you going to be on the power slot on a team with Jacoby Myers? They were going to be asking him to play on the outside, running more downfield routes. He had no business doing that. He's just not fast enough. So that was one where like kind of blending the team dynamics with the individual prospect dynamics. And I think Jack Besh was somebody to avoid. I mean, I even got the name wrong because I don't even need, he doesn't even deserve the correct name. But Deontay Thornton, 4th round pick. Like we don't draft 4th round wide receivers in the 15th round of fantasy drafts. Like, it's just not a good way to do business, especially when they're on the Raiders. In Deontay Thornton, he had like 16 catches. It's not good. So tough look for Deontay Thornton. Anthony Richardson, you sign Daniel Jones and you give him like not for sure starter money, but more money than backups. That's a good sign that he's not going to play, especially when they're trying to keep their jobs there. That's the front office and the coaching staff. Anthony Richardson was just like not good enough as a pro, and then Daniel Jones was ready for the job. So Anthony Richardson got beat out early and often. It was pretty obvious if you're reading the Colts reporters that it was going to be Daniel Jones's job, especially in August. So you had to get out of the Anthony Richardson round 16 stuff. I thought maybe round 18, that's fine enough. That's a big difference. He was being drafted rounds 12, 13, 14. It was really just a big sinking ship. But you can always pull out from it. Damian Martinez, another one. I liked him on tape. And then you fall to the 7th round, you see there's character risk, and you're out. Like, no more. Like, the second you see character risk fall in the draft, see you later. Not for me. Jatavian Sanders, I don't know how that one was ever going to work out. So those were the worst picks in every single round. We'll do more content like this. I want to take a quick look at the chat, though. Let me pull this back up, see what we got, because I want to see if you guys won any leagues, if you have any kind of insights from the season, just kind of how the whole season went out. All right, Hambone Slappy. Took my league ship down tonight. CMC and McBride were my targets in the draft. Thanks to you guys, and those guys carried my team. Thank you both. Can't wait for next year. Boom. Got a couple of those guys right. Yeah, I really liked the Trey McBride stuff. Just regression was bound for him. And then Christian McCaffrey, always come shoot for first place, you know. So, good team there. Jonah John, winning by 21 in a tight end premium. My opponent has Pitts. Woo! You win 76% of the time. So you're in a good spot. Maybe it's even 82% of the time. So good luck to you there. Vamp 32 up 50. Opponent has Puka. Will I bring it home? I will even say against Puka Nacua, 50 points is too much. Congrats to you, Vamp. Bid Moon Loveland, let's freaking go. That was a huge one for me. I knew freaking Loveland was good. I'm sorry if I got you guys in week 16 where I was hyping him up. I know he's good at football. I know Caleb's good at football. So glad we got one there. Gonzalez becomes a YouTube member. I think that will do it for us. Obviously, we have tomorrow Sam Sherman, just to recap here. Current driver's seat for $2 million. I just want to refresh the leaderboards. Right now, Sam Sherman, expected winnings, $1.4 million. That's what you can do over on Underdog Fantasy. Hopefully, Sam can pull it through. But hopefully, some of these people right here are subscribed below. You guys have already been tagging me in some of your winnings over on Underdog and elsewhere. Big thank you for obviously subscribing to the show. We can only do this because you guys are engaged with us. That also means that you guys are going to be engaged with us for the offseason content. So NFL draft staring us down, NFL playoffs staring us down, free agency, all that stuff staring us right down. We will be back Tuesday, I'll say Tuesday for some type of preview show for week 18. We got New Year's out there. I'm going to be on the grill with some steaks. Hopefully you guys go outside, touch some grass. Stop scrolling, man. It's so bad for you. Stop scrolling. Read Underdog Network instead. Go outside. Go to the beach. Go on a freaking hike. And go win $2 million like Sam Sherman might out there. So promo code the show. We'll be back Tuesday. Thanks for tuning in.